Week one's come to a close. You're probably noticing that you're a little bit more sore than you were the previous 6-week training cycle. And this will happen when we have such a drastic change in our training stimulus. So previous month we were going into strength, power, which were fewer reps, higher intensities, and now we've moved into lower moderate intensities with higher reps. And this is what's resulting in that stiffness. So the increased volume is what's causing a little bit more discomfort. But it will subside, and what we're going to do today is focus on how to flush that out. Movement is going to be the most important thing. The more that you move, the less stiffness you're going to accumulate. Massaging, massage guns, rolling, this will not help this type of soreness. Stay hydrated, lots of water. Try to get up every hour or more often than that. Make sure you're not sitting down. You sit down, these tissues are going to glue themselves together even more, and every time you get up and move around, it's going to feel stiffer. This is why when you wake up the next morning, you feel the stiffest, because everything's had a chance to glue together. So today's goal is going to be going through some movement to help loosen up this stiffness which has accumulated in the previous week. We'll get into some static stretches, which can be good as well to help unglue these tissues and get you ready for week 2. For those of you that have just done a workout, okay, and this is your warm down, maybe you've done another warm up, you can jump ahead to the stretch, just follow those timestamps below. But for those of you thinking, okay, I'll just jump to the stretch, it will be infinitely more beneficial to you to do the warm up here. This is just a general prep with a flow before getting in the stretches than to go in those stretches cold. It's not going to be as effective. But here we go, 44 minutes of mobility, functional mobility to help support the functional strength you're doing during the week. So let's start. It's going to be a bit of a general prep, bit of a flow, bit of a static stretch sequence that we go through here. Hands underneath the shoulders, flex and extend through the spine. Feel those end ranges. Okay, and I've done all the workouts this week too, so I'm going to try and replicate what I would personally do that will help you loosen up too. Flex, extend. Let's get the breath in and out. In through the nose, out through the nose. Paying attention to what feels stiff. Knees a little wider, hands a little narrower, one hand behind the head, elbow down to the hand, and rotate. Keep that breathing going. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Switching sides. Two, one. Butt back. Get your knees a little narrower if you need to. Arms overhead. Moving back and forth. Feel that stretch through the lats, shoulders. You probably feel a little bit through the hamstrings as well. Pulse. Or say just rock back and forth. 2, 1. Pull your hips forwards. Allow yourself to get in the full extension here. Let those hips drop to one side. Let the hips drop to the other side. Hands, feet a little closer together, hands a little wider. Make sure the hips are over top of the knees. You can drop the hips over to one side, drop the hips over to the other side. Looking over the opposite shoulder. Feel that rotation through the spine. 3, 2, and 1. Let's go into some windshield wipers. So hands behind the body here, heel shoulder width apart, drop the knee so that it's trailing right behind the heel. This is important. Knee should be right behind the heel. Adjust your feet to get to that position. Then make sure that both shins come down to the ground. You can rotate your torso as much as you need to make sure those shins come down to the ground. And then as you begin to loosen up, try to keep the torso pointing in forward direction while the shins move. When we get those windshield wipers, it's going to create a little bit more tension through the spine. 4, 3, 2, 1. And we're going to come back to those in a minute. Now we're going to go into some rotations through the spine, supine rotations, top leg, over top of the body, bend to the knee, keep that knee down on the ground, pin it down with the opposite arm, lower leg is straight. I'm going to take my free arm now. Thumb comes from the knee and up overhead. From the knee overhead. Try to keep that knee down. It's going to come up a little bit as the arm comes over. Try to keep that down. Inhale on the way up. Focus on that breath. Try to get a little further each time. Straighten out that lower leg. Try to create a little bit more length. 3, 2, and 1. Switching sides. So you might be thinking, it's my legs that hurt. Why don't we work more on the legs? Well, we will. The spine, if we work on this, remember, straighten out the leg, top leg is bent. By loosening up the spine, it's going to allow us to get into deeper positions. We get into that finishing lizard stretch at the end. The more that we can allow our spine to freely rotate, the fewer roadblocks we have to get that full range of motion that we want to achieve by the end of this session. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Now we come back to the windshield wiper position. So same idea, 90 or 9 knees down the ground, shins down the ground, but now we want to get into a 90-90 position. So I want to push that back leg back a little bit so I can get 90 degrees from the front leg and back leg. This is going to be important to maximize tension, 90 degrees at the knee, and I want to reach forwards with the arm. This is where we're going to start to feel the stiffness. Come back up to center. So let's get this reach down. Might seem pretty straightforward, but I want you to focus on a couple things. When I reach, I'm going to rotate my palm up, reach as far as I can. Inhale as I come back up, and I want to straighten my spine here. As I reach, my spine flexes, and I exhale. My other arm is supporting my body weight, and let's work on breathing through this. Inhale up, exhale down. Every exhale, try to get a little bit further in that stretch. 3 more. 2. And 1. Let's bring the back leg forwards into a cross leg position. Going to hinge now. Feel a stretch on the outsides of the hips. And then I want to lift that leg up. I can use my other hand for support, reach back, and I'm just going to reach forward, or hinge forward, but don't round the spine. So I'm going to come forwards, cross leg hinge, get to that 90-90, keep that back nice and straight. Don't round the spine. 3, 2, and last 1. Let's switch sides. 90-90 now on the other side. Okay, find that 90 at the hips. Keep yourself upright. Probably noticing how much stiffer you are now on this side. It's because we've loosened up on the other side. And let's reach. Exhale. Palm comes up. Inhale back up. 10 reps here. Get a little bit further on each exhale. Last 2. And back into our cross leg. Other leg is on top now. Hinge forwards. Rotate that leg back. Back straight. Okay, really focus on keeping your spine straight here the whole way through. If you need to, you can put your hand on your low back, sort of feel what that straight back is like. We get here in the hinge, still keep that low back straight. 3. Last 1, 2, and 1. Okay, let's go into, come back to this in the static stretching, but going into a little lizard position here. Now paying attention to where you're feeling the stretch. So now we're going into the areas that are gonna feel a little bit tighter. The back of the front leg, okay, a little bit of the front of the back hip. I wanna make sure my big toe is on the ground, little toe is on the ground, heel firmly planted on the ground. You can put your hand on top of the foot to help keep it there, but I want you to then try and get your knee as far forward as you can while keeping your heel down on the ground. And this is gonna be your position we wanna stay in for this whole stretch, this whole sequence and this flow. Now I'm going to gently pulse, just going into some circles. So as I'm pulsing back and forth, I'm also creating circles at the hip, opening up, in through the nose, out through the nose, keeping that big toe on the ground. Switch directions with the circles, continue to pulse, gradually create a little bit more space here in the hip. 3, 2, 1. I'm going to maintain the same position. Again, make sure your knee is not directly over top of the heel. We want this over the toes. I'm going to push the knee out and look over the back shoulder, and then I'm going to rotate up, look at the ceiling. So I'm going to push the knee out, look over the back shoulder, rotate up, look at the ceiling. Hand is on the knee, help keep that knee out, especially as I rotate back. I want to keep pushing that knee out, maintain that tripod foot, heel, big toe, pinky toe on the ground. Inhale as we look back. Exhale as we look up. Now we begin to feel more of that relationship of the hips, spine, how they need to be working freely. Allow as much rotation through the spine and through the hips. Last one. Loosening up. I'm going to come back to this. Now let's go into the hamstring. I'm going to sink back onto my heel. I'm going to straighten out the front leg, and then I want to come forwards, lunge, get that knee forwards, and then come back. Sitting back on the heel. I don't need to put all my weight. I'm pointing my toes behind me as I just straighten out that front leg. Just minimal tension right now on the hamstring. Working on this movement, flexing and extending at the knee. Last one. Forwards and back. All right. Other side. Okay, get ready for it. This is going to feel a little more stiff now. Really loosen up that other side. So let's get into position again. So I've got my foot. Use my hand to hold the foot down, big toe, little toe, heel on the ground. I want to bring my knee as far forward as I can with that heel on the ground, and then just adjust my back leg. Trying to find an equal stretch between the front and back sides of the hip, or the legs on those front hip, back hip. I'm going to pulse forwards and draw circles. As I'm pulsing, think about pushing that knee out as wide as you can. Changing directions, knee going around in circles, feel open up through the hip, pulse. Keep breathing. And then let's go into our rotation. So hand on the knee, I want to inhale as I look back, exhale as I look up. 10 reps here. Every rep, try and get a little bit more rotation on both the up and down sides. Last 2 and 1. center. And let's go into the hamstring. Straighten out. I'm also getting full flexion in the back knee here. So as I sink down onto the heel, full flexion. 3, 2, and 1. Okay. Time to get into a frog position. So let's go into the groin now. Find a distance where you start to feel the stretch gently, not too much. Feel it evenly from left and right sides, and then just pulsing back and forth. Feel that stretch increase as the hips come back to the heels. As I sink the hips back, that's when I exhale. Inhale on the way forwards. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Get a little internal rotation. Coming forwards now, so I'm going to rotate at the hip, adjust my hands to help support my weight. Rotate. Each kick, get a little bit more, I wouldn't say violent, but a little more rotation. Last 2, 1, and then sink down into that frog. Pulsing a little bit lower. Now we're going to go into a single leg groin stretch. And as we sink back, feel that stretch increase down the side leg. Five more. 5, 4, 2, 1, and on to the other side. Knee comes down. Other leg. Sinking. 10. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Bring that in. Okay. Go into the quads. 1 foot forwards. Gonna grab same leg, same arm. Get your balance, hand go on the knee. Now how we create this tension is by manipulating or biasing the back hip. So I don't want to get my heel all the way to the butt, but I am pulling the heel towards the butt. If you bring the heel all the way to the butt, you can put a lot of pressure on the knee. So again, make sure you've got the top of your thigh supported here. We're not resting on the kneecap. And then what I want to do is I want to squeeze the glutes, press the hips forwards just a little bit until you feel a light stretch through the quads. Once you get comfortable in this stretch, we're going to switch arms. So from here, reach back. Okay, if you can't, then stay with the same arm, and that's fine. Now we want to work same side. Arm comes up behind the head. Focus on your breath. Find one spot to help balance. Another 3, 2, 1. Come out, drop the foot. Now let's go on to the other side. Same leg, same arm, hand on the knee, find your balance point. Just get a little bit of that stretch to start here. A couple breaths. Focus on keeping that hip forwards to create tension, not about pulling the heel back. Once we've got that heel in a position where you can feel the stretch, use the hips or gently lean back to increase or decrease tension by leaning forwards. And let's switch arms now if you can. Other arm comes up, behind the head, elbow up to the ceiling. And let's focus on breath work here. And when you notice, you focus on your breath, big deep inhales, big deep exhales. Generate a little bit more heat. Help support that increased blood flow into the areas that we're stretching. Try to focus on calming down the system as well, autonomic nervous system. Especially when you're doing a lot of high intensity exercise, lower that back leg now. Want to allow that nervous system to relax. Okay, we're going to go now into the hamstrings a little bit more deliberately than we did last time. So find a position, knee is carefully supported underneath. Okay, toe is pointed. Now I want to focus on alignment with this front leg. Big toe is pointing directly up. You're going to have a tendency to want that foot to drift outwards. You want to focus on keeping that toe upwards and then slightly rotate that toe slightly inwards. Now, as you notice, when you rotate the toe slightly inwards, get the stretch on the outside of the hamstring. When you rotate the toe outwards, you'll feel that stretch move a little bit more into the middle. Okay, we don't want the foot to go so far out because we're not going to be able to get the inside of the hamstring. That's what we were just doing with those groin stretches. So it's important you keep the toe up or slightly inwards. Now you can tweak this. This is where you, depending on where you're tight, can rotate this foot. It's actually rotating at the hip, but you can use the toe sort of as your indicator to what your hip's doing. So that's a nice balanced stretch for me. I'm pretty much neutral, maybe a little bit inwards. And then from here, my back is nice and straight, and then I just gently hinge, pick up tension, forwards. Exhale as I hinge forwards. Hinge, exhale. Move a little bit into slower, longer, prolonged stretches. Still a little bit of this pulsing, but what we're going to be doing for the rest of the month as well is introducing, we've done this in the past, those of you who've done Mobility Club, it's called PNF, proprioneuroceptive flexion. And the fancy word, PNF, just means creating an active stretch. So we're going to introduce this here so you get a sense of what we're trying to do. Now, as I hinge forward, I want to hold that hinge forwards. I'm going to push my heel down into the ground. When I actively push that heel down to the ground, I want to exhale and then relax. Inhale, let that leg relax. Get a little bit of the shakes. Notice how that's increased our range. So the benefit to PNF is that we are not passively, but actively stretching, which allows the muscles to actually loosen up. How that happens, even though we're actively contracting the muscles, they were going to allow themselves to shorten initially, and then as soon as you relax, they will lengthen, and they will allow you to get a little bit deeper into the stretch. But beyond that, let's do another set here. Push the heel down. Go for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beyond that, it's not just muscles that we're stretching. The tendons, which the muscles attach into, which then in turn attach into the bone, also need to be stretched. This is why I refer to soft tissue. It's not just the muscles that we're trying to stretch, it's all of the soft tissue supporting the muscles. So the fascia, the tendons, and doing these active stretches helps increase a healthy range of motion because there's hypermobility. Let's do our last one here. Push the heel down. Push 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it's come up. We're just going to go into a deep blizzard here. And then let's go on to the other side. So hypermobility, for the sake of just being more flexible, is not necessarily helpful. We want functional range of motion, right? Because eventually, if you get too far If you think of it like an elastic band, if you overstretch the elastic band, it snaps. Or what is more likely to happen than snap is you just lose function. It does not work as well. So let's work on now, find that position on the other side. Remember the toes up and in. You can sort of play with that. Find a nice neutral position where you're maximizing the stretch through the full hamstring. And I'm breathing in through the nose and out as I hinge forward. In back, out forwards. So we're getting into essentially 3 different types of stretches here. The static, dynamic, and active. So right now we're doing the dynamic stretch, which is this gentle pulse forwards. But it's a little bit of a static position too because we're maintaining tension even as we relax. So think of the dynamic stretches when we do our leg swings, high knees, stuff where we're constantly moving, but moving the joints through a full range of motion. That's typically what our dynamic stretches are. Static stretches are where we just hold them. So this is a little combination of static and dynamic as we pulse. And then we're going to move into the active. Let's push the heel down. Push for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pick up the slack. Chest comes forward. So now we're in a static. Feel that first one. The first one I really noticed too, and the last one. Okay, especially if you haven't been doing a lot of hamstring stretches, but also because of this week. Muscles are a little bit more stiff. So pick up the slack in between releases. So those of you who have not done this before, okay, let's push the heel down for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now I'm going to hinge forwards. As I relax, that muscle lengthens again, but I want to pick up the slack. I don't want to lengthen it too much so I no longer feel the tension. It's always important when you're stretching. You should be in a comfortable stretch. Should never be uncomfortable. If it's uncomfortable, you've gone too far. Okay, you've got to find a position that allows you to keep, you think on a scale of discomfort, 10 being the most uncomfortable, 0 you can't feel anything, 4 to 6. Okay, 6 on the high end, the absolute high end. Last one here, push down for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale up. And then deep stretch into the lizard. Good. Okay, let's finish up with some static stretching. We're going to go into, start with the lizard. We'll go on the other leg here, and then into the external rotator, so glutes outside of the hips. So right at the beginning, close to the beginning, we started in this lizard position. We were pulsing of the stretches. So now what we're going to do, thinking about that 4 out of 10, or 4 out of 10, 4 to 6 out of 10 discomfort. So there's a couple phases in the lizard here. We should be loose enough now to get at least the knuckles down onto the ground. Phase 2 of this, if you can, is to get your forearm down to the ground. Now I've seen this before. Those of you that are hypermobile or somehow relating this to yoga, we want to think about how this is relating to our functional strength, meaning that we are taking the transferability of our positions and applying them from the stretch into the lunge. I want to keep that knee forwards. Only get the arm down to the ground if you can keep your knee forwards. Your hand also needs to be on a line inside the foot, so you can't have your hand forwards or back. Okay, this changes the stretch entirely. We want to think if you're at the bottom of a squat, if you're at the bottom of a lunge, what position do you need to be in? And we want to support that with these stretches. Okay, this is where we use, I mean the term functional strength, okay, or functional range of motion, and this functional stretch to support that range of motion and the strength that we do. So if you can get the forearm down, go for it. I can't. That will push me above a 6 out of 10 on the discomfort scale. But I'm going to focus on my breath coming in and out. Today we're not doing super long stretches, but throughout the week, if you feel like one stretch just resonates with you and you feel great afterwards, warm up a little bit or do it right after a workout, and then you can hold each of these for 3 to 6 minutes per side. So I'm going to get down partially. I'm not going to get my full forearm down, but I'm going to get it partially down. Still keeping that knee forwards. Do a little check here. Position check. If you've got a yoga block, actually kettlebells are good here. I'll use a kettlebell on the other side. Then you can leverage this and get a little bit lower. You can really balance into it and relax. We're gonna go for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Come on, up, out. And if you do have your kettlebell close, this will help. And on to the other side. Kettlebell, yoga block, whatever that is. All right. So find your position first on the other side. Again, note how much tighter you are. It's not that this side is necessarily tighter, it's just that we got really loose on the other side. Okay, so knee forwards, big toe on the ground, hands in line with the foot. And then focus on your breathing. Yoga block's really better for this, but when I get down, I can put my arm in here and rest on it a little bit more. Notice how the kettlebell's still inside the foot, inside this line. For those of you who was it last week we did the world's greatest stretch, whenever it was. Okay, the difference here of having the height on the kettlebell versus the floor. Okay, much like having the foot on the wall versus just free hanging. Okay, you get to fully relax into this a little bit more, allows you to get a little bit deeper. It does make the stretch a little bit better, but it doesn't mean that by not having it, it's not good. Focus on, I'm just doing a little position check here. I notice my knee start to slide back. Keep pushing that knee out over top of the pinky toe, but keep the big toe on the ground. In through the nose, out through the mouth, and you can even start to switch this into the nose, out through the nose. 15 more seconds. Five, 4. Inhale up. Final stretch. So we typically, on the note of the world's greatest stretch, which is a external rotator stretch. Actually, we got 2 more stretches. I've lied. We got 2 more stretches. But on the note of the world's greatest stretch. So let's get into that 90-90 position again that we were doing when we worked on our movement at the beginning. But we want to just fully relax into this one. So this is going to be a hybrid pigeon. Why I use the term pigeon, a lot of you are familiar with that, but I want to think about position on the leg. So the 90-90 is what changes this from what your typical pigeon would be, which is just fold forwards. So although we will fold forwards, it's important that we maintain this relationship. I want to get my chest over top of the knee, and I want to try and stay straight. So don't just rotate down and don't just bring the chest down. I want to come down deliberately over top of my femur here, my upper leg bone on the front leg. And I want to maintain tension. If I just round my spine into this, I'm not going to maintain full tension. So although my back is not perfectly straight, because it's staying relatively straight, I'm maintaining tension through the outside of the leg. And on every exhale, I'm getting a little bit lower. In through the nose, out through the mouth, or in through the nose, out through the nose. Gradually making a little bit more range of motion here. Maintain that position, stay square. This last little bit now, I want you to come right down to the ground. Keep that chest over top of the knee. I'm positioning my hand behind the heel on the front foot so it doesn't slide. Keep myself even. Gradually make my way down. Still maintain that tension. Down at the bottom for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pushing back up on the other side. Okay, so it took a while to get down there to loosen right up, but also maintain tension. So let's get that 90-90 position. Okay, get yourself up nice and tall. Begin to hinge. Just start to feel that tension initially. And then slowly make your way down. Every exhale, get a little bit deeper. We're going to gradually work our way down towards the floor. So this hybrid pigeon. Okay, and in these positions here, what we're focusing on, the 90-90 and the knees over the toes, okay, is how you want to be at the bottom or maintain throughout a squat. So pushing the knees, the cue of pushing your knees out is often because it's not that you need to get your knees outside the foot, it's often they are too far in. So it's the action of pushing the knees out that also creates tension through the hip. It activates the hip. That's what we want to have a good safe, allow for a good deep squat to depth or past depth while maintaining a neutral spine. Hence our emphasis on keeping the spine nice and straight when we get through all of these positions. Transferability, functional range of motion. I think it'll be something that I continually teach for the rest of my life, is that it's not just about going through these motions. There are deliberate practices through each of the motions that you need to take responsibility to learn and understand if you want to get better. That's it. Every exhale, get a little bit lower. Go down to the forearm now as I've loosened up enough. Still keeping myself square. Keep my foot forwards, why I have my hand behind it, because it'll tend to slide. And then right down, keeping those hips square. When I say hips square, shoulders square over top of the hips. So don't let that one shoulder get higher than the other. Try and keep it down. Hang out at the bottom here for 5 breaths. Good. Coming up, final stretch. These ones are shorter. Internal rotators, just to oppose what we just did there. Lie down your back. Have a look. Watch how I'm doing this first before you lie down, because it'll be tougher to see. There's 3 phases really here. We're only going to go through 2 because we don't have a weight. I'm going to drop one knee down. My other foot is flat on the ground right now, just so that you can see this. And as I drop this knee down, it's important that I don't feel tension in the knee. I'm going to feel tension in and around the front outside of its hip. And this is important because if you start to feel any pressure in the knee, you need to adjust your angle. So bend your knee or extend your knee so that you can get your foot in a position that allows the leg to just fall freely without the pressure going into the knee. Once you've got that down, so phase 1 is just allowing the weight or gravity to push the knee down into the ground. Phase 2 is you would get the other leg over top as a weight. Now, pay attention when you're doing this, again, to any pressure in the knee. Shouldn't have any pressure in the knee, but its hip is going to rise up a little bit more. So there's a little bit of a balance. When I first start here, I'm actually getting more of a stretch right now in through the hips, and I'm going to cue myself. I'll let you know when I go into the foot on top of the knee, but this internal rotation, okay, again, just helps create a little bit more space, especially when we're working on the squat. This internal rotation, I want to feel the stretch. It's kind of an awkward feeling, different type of feeling, because this is not so much focusing on stretching one muscle or a couple muscles in one area. It's the rotation of the muscles, and it's rotation of the femur in the joint. So rather than just a straight stretch, we've got a bit of a coil stretch. I'm now going to lift that other leg over top. You can allow the hip to come up. That's okay. just so that I can relax. And now you're gonna feel this stretch move into a little bit more of your TFL. Okay, so on the outside of the hip, if you put your fingers on the top of the hip bone and then move it towards, call this the greater trochanter, where the femur has a little bump on the outside. So if you take your thumb and middle finger, it's sort of, that's the distance between the two. Okay, so the top of the hip bone or the outside of that pelvic crest, and then move your finger down towards the outside leg onto that GT. Okay, that area there, and if you just sort of trace almost like a protractor here, okay, over top to the front of the hip, that area, that TFL, tensor fascia lata, that we were stretching along, is where we feel it. Now, by the time I finished that massive lecture on anatomy, you might have now had that stretch subside, and that's okay because it's now moving into the rest of the muscles. That TFL tends to tighten up first, almost protect the rest of the hip. So we get another 2, 1, lift the top leg off, bottom leg comes up. Okay, and as that muscle protects it, it's also what prevents the rest of the leg from getting stretched. Okay, other leg down. I don't need to go through that full explanation again, just want you to focus on the knee not hurting here. The one advantage doing this either with shoes or barefoot is less sliding. So if you're doing these stretches in a warm dwelling, unlike this garage, shoes or barefoot, whatever can prevent you from sliding. So a couple others. We hold this here. Let me muse. I feel the stretch sort of move around in different areas. It's not that it's darting from one area to the next, but I use this sort of unscientific term to say a coil stretch. And I use the coil stretch because typically we stretch linearly. You feel that hamstring stretch that we did, the hip stretch, the quad, the groin, it's almost in a straight line. When we get into this rotation, we feel things a little bit differently. And the one thing that you'll notice is that you'll feel a stretch in one area and then it sort of moves to another area. And it's not just along that linear position, it sort of moves from the outside to the top to the inside. And you just want to pay attention to that because we don't want any of the tension going into the knee. Like right now, I'm adjusting my foot because I felt now that I've got a little bit more tension in the knee when I don't want it there. I want this to be around the hip. And as I start to feel that sort of moving around subside, I know I'm ready to move into the next step, but not until then, because things are still sort of calibrating here. The body's thinking, okay, what do I need to do to protect itself? I'm going to fire off this muscle to help keep it tighter. Then it realized, nope, false alarm, don't need it. I'm going to relax. Okay, but then you relax, and that tension now that it was where it was trying to protect the knee goes into the knee. You need to readjust, and then we're back to the beginning. Who's following me still? Who's toned me out? Top leg comes on top now. Now, I've always had a difference from one side to the other. This side, I've been able to get the leg down. Bit of a imbalance in the hips. Admittingly, I've not done this as much. And in the past, when I had, noticed the improvement. And to be primarily, and I realize this now saying it, it's because I'm not running as much. This is a go-to stretch when I begin to run. Your hip flexors start to get really tight. Looking forward to doing that again. In through the nose, out through the nose. But if you've made it this far, then you can't dislike my talking that much. And if it's on mute, then it doesn't matter. But on that note, it's been 8 months now since snapping my Achilles. And back in July, we're in December now, if you're watching this later. Back in July, I was starting to feel good. End of July, tried a couple run sessions, got a little bit probably too aggressive. And then the muscles in my foot, not even the Achilles, started to malfunction, I'll say. They got overworked. And it's been since then, and like beginning of August, that I've been working on that now. And it's only been the past few weeks working with a couple physiotherapists. Shout out to Orsi at 416 Physio and Jason at Trilogy. that I finally gotten this under control. I let it nag, and this is a lesson to all of you. Nagging injuries are the most annoying ones because you can manage them, you can work through it, but then it just doesn't go away. I finally made a decision to stop doing some of the stuff that was bothering it, that I thought it would just go away on its own. Finally got it under control. Last night, played hockey for the first time, the first organized sport I've played in 8 months. And I think it's probably the happiest, one of the happiest moments I've had in the last 8 months. Realize probably why I played so many sports growing up, because I love it. Another 2, 1, and good. Take that top foot off, foot on the ground, let that knee come up. Let's bring the knees into the chest. Little counter stretch. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I still feel a little stiff, but I definitely feel better. All right, rolling up. So this was good. This was a full 45, not quite, 43 minute, 44 minute stretch. Oh, feels good. Do this one throughout the week. This is a great one for the hips. And that's what's great about me doing the programming is I know how you feel, whether you feel better or I feel worse or vice versa. Matters not. This helps support the whole fitness journey. See you in the next one.